will
Oh.
start. Then people can
Nope.
start. 1 minute.
Okay, no problem. I'm in no hurry. Just glad to be here.
We are glad to have you. Thank you. Okay, yeah, people will start joining. Maybe we can start. Give me a minute. I will start recording. Then I'll introduce you, and then you can start. You can take over and share. Are you okay with that?
Yep,
right.
That'll work.
1 minute.
Recording in progress.
All right, we are on. Hello everyone. Welcome to our virtual event platform. Today, we are delighted to have Chad from Reef Nutrition as our guest speaker. Chad graciously agreed to give us this wonderful presentation today, where we'll learn a little bit about reef nutrition, nutrition in with finicky fish, and much more. So welcome, Chad. Over to you.
All right, here we go. I'm gonna grab my screen share here, and minimize this. And can you guys all see that?
Yep, we can see.
Slideshow from the beginning. Okay, here we go. So I appreciate everybody being here today. Thank you so much for giving me a second chance. Thank you for your time. Good morning, good afternoon. So I'm going to go into the history of our company, talk a little bit about myself. We're going to get into the products, some feeding videos, things like that. So take a, kick back, relax, and hopefully I can get to all the questions in the chat towards the end. So this should take us, 45 minutes to an hour, and it's very informative. So my name is Chad Clayton. I am involved with live feeds, trade shows, education, farm biosecurity, research and development at Reed Mariculture. So Reed Mariculture is the parent company of Reef Nutrition. Reef Nutrition is quite simply just one of our brands. And so Reed Mariculture has been in existence since the late 90s. We started off as an inland oyster hatchery. Tim Reed, the owner, wanted to culture oysters. And to do that, he, after speaking with many, many people about oyster culture, he was told, you got to grow algae. So you grow the algae, you grow the right species, you grow enough of it, you could culture a lot of oysters. So Tim started growing algae and discovered that he was meant to do this, like to grow algae, to persevere through all the pitfalls and all the hoops and hurdles and everything that it takes to grow phytoplankton, which can be quite challenging, not just small scale, but a very large scale. And so he got quite good at it, started growing more and more of it, and he caught the eye of many universities and some hatcheries that were working with bivalves, and they're like, hey, is there any way you can do something for this industry? Can you grow algae and sell it to us so that we don't have to grow it? Or if we're having seasonality issues, we can buy it from you. Let's say a company, oyster company, can't grow the right species. That's very challenging for them. They can buy algae from us. And there's people that don't want to deal with growing algae at all, whether it's on a university scale, a hatchery scale, research scale. So these people rely on us, and we sell marine microalgae to over 500 entities, hatcheries, universities, marine ornamental operations all over the world. And it's just helped basically with what we have done. We've helped accelerate aquaculture because culturing phytoplankton on a massive scale and a large scale is has been a bottleneck, what we call a bottleneck in aquaculture for many decades. And so we help to alleviate, to relieve these folks of this bottleneck, and they can get on with their lives. They can expand their operations without having to have giant greenhouses full of algae and staff to take care of it, and all the the threat of contamination, all these things that go into growing phytoplankton. They can just basically avoid it and do it on a small scale, or just not do it at all. And so we've been doing this since the 90s, and in 2004 we had some hobbyists approach us and say, look, we're interested in what you guys are doing. Like, we think that your phytoplankton can be used in the home aquarium. And there had been people that had have grown algae, marine microalgae, and fed it to their aquariums for many years, as far back into the 80s, 70s, 80s. People have been doing this, but a lot of people, don't want to do it. They don't want to grow phytoplankton. They don't want that extra commitment. So some hobbyists said, look, we've got these non-photosynthetic corals. We've got bivalves. We're very much interested in buying some phytoplankton from you. Can you create a product for us? And so that's where PhytoFeast came to be. PhytoFeast is a 6-species blend of our phytoplankton that people can use for these animals. And so it basically resulted in more long-term care of these more difficult to keep animals, different non-photosynthetic bivalves, like the ridgeback clam, these flame scallops, oysters, different bivalve species, sponge, non-photosynthetic corals that consume small particle foods. We're now able to really keep these animals long-term with phytoplankton, with a phytoplankton product like this, and and many other products. So from there, Reef Nutrition kind of blossomed. We came out with multiple other products over the years. I've been with the company for about 13 years. I was brought on to culture Copepods primarily, and then my career and my position in the company from there. I come from big aquaculture, so I've grown fish. I've worked at ORA, working with clownfish. I've cultured over 40 different species of marine ornamentals, live feed organisms, seahorses, clownfish, cardinal fish, dottybacks, gobies, you name it. I've done it. I've grown fish out of. I've done zebrafish research, molecular biology in St. Louis on the zebra danios. So I'm a fish guy at heart, but now I grow the fish food. So it's kind of cool, and it's been really neat working with Copepods and helping to accelerate that aspect of aquaculture and the hobby, with growing these things, providing single species cultures, and educating biologists, hatchery technicians, public aquariums, and hobbyists on how to best use Copepods and grow them. So we're going to talk some more about that a little bit. Okay, so what we bring to the plate, we're a 1.5 million gallon phytoplankton farm, and so I'm just going to talk about this one product real quick. So this is one of our most popular products. This is a species of algae called Nanochloropsis. That's the genus, actually. And so you see there's this number on there, 3,600. So what this product is this is a 1 liter bottle, a 1 quart bottle. It's about a liter. And it is the equivalent of 3,600 liters, which is almost 1,000 gallons of live algae culture at 100 million cells per milliliter. It is equivalent to 1,000 gallons of microalgae culture, this 1 liter bottle. And so that's what we're talking about when we say our products are concentrated and we have the most biomass that anybody can provide in the industry, not just the hobby, but in aquaculture. There are very few people that are doing this kind of thing in the world. And we're one that a lot of people look to when they want to buy concentrated algae that is incredibly cost effective for their operations. And so, and this product here, this species can actually be frozen for years. So a customer can buy, large quantities of this, store it in a freezer, thaw it out when they need it, and feed it out to their animals. This is the team. So these are the owners. So Tim Reed there on the left, gazing into one of his marine microalgae mixtures that we prepare and then bag up or bottle up and sell. And so that's him. And then there you have him and his dad, Ed, who's now in his mid 80s and still comes to the farm every day. And then Lynn Reed, his wife. And so these are my extended family. They are my supervisors. They are my friends. They are an amazing company to work with. I am pretty much going to retire with Reed Mariculture. And it's just an incredibly dynamic crew. Everybody is always involved. Tim is always involved with growing, not just running the company and being president and CEO. Lynn is also involved in operations and also all kinds of back end, computer stuff and customer service things. And so it's amazing what we can do. And we only have about 20 people, and half of us are involved with the actual aquaculture aspect of the company, the growing things and quality control. And the rest of us are kind of involved with, customer relations and things like that. So. Okay, so let's start getting into the products. So this is, kind of a site you would see in a pet store. If it's a store that sells a lot of our products, our products are refrigerated liquid suspension, which has been very unique in the industry. Because, a lot of people are used to feeding flakes and pellets and frozen foods. And so we are one of very few companies that make a refrigerated food. And basically, we don't add a whole lot of preservatives. We use refrigeration to preserve the biomass in our products. And so this, if you're in a store and they carry us, you're going to find us in a refrigerator somewhere in that store, whether it's a glass front or behind the scenes or, just a regular, home refrigerator. Okay, let's get into the Copepods here. So Tigger pods, this is our most popular product. We culture this species, Tigriopus californicus, at our farm. We provide animals into the hobby as well as into aquaculture, because some people do like to use these to capture fish and things like that. And so, so we pack about 3,000 per bottle. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of the benefits of this product. So people that are keeping mandarin dragonettes or seahorses or pipefish or other very finicky fish that basically require live feed organisms, whether they're, eating dead things or not. Like a mandarin. Mandarins can eat pellets, they can eat frozen foods, they can eat dead things, but they will definitely continue to forage for live feed organisms. And so Tigriopus californicus, the Tigger pod, is a very good live feed organism for that animal. And that's why we came out with it 15 years ago. We took this product to pet stores and we had store owners that are like, no way, these animals are going to eat that. They peck all, we get live rock in from Fiji or wherever, and they eat the stuff that's already on the rocks. So, and we would show them, we'd pour the Tigger pods in, you'd see the Tigger pods, crawling on surfaces, and you would see the mandarin dragonet going after them and eating them very gladly. So a lot of people use Tigger pods to either supplement the population of pods in their tank to keep these animals going, keep them alive and healthy and nice and robust. And some people will culture them and feed them to larval fish. And we even have people that are feeding Tigger pods to axolotls, because the Tigger pod can survive in fresh water and remain active for about 30 minutes, which is just a phenomenal characteristic. We love animals that are very hardy, very robust, and this is one of them. These guys can live in a variety of salinities. They can tolerate a wide range of temperatures. And in fact, there's this really funny cold myth thing going around in the hobby where people say, well, this is a cold water species, and that is absolutely not true. We grow these guys all year round in a greenhouse with no climate control, natural sunlight, and we're growing them in the summertime. We have no seasonality issues. And if any of you have been to Silicon Valley in the summer, it is hot, and our greenhouses have no air conditioning. And so we get upwards of 110, 115 degrees on those very hot days. And our cultures are well over 80 degrees, and we're still cranking out Tigger pods. We can grow a lot of them and grow them in this way because of the phytoplankton that we produce. And so we have essentially domesticated this animal. We haven't had any wild caught into our cultures in over 10 years. And so these guys are fully aquaculture. They are unique to our growing systems, and they are very hardy. We've built in this hardiness into them, basically with just, accidental selective breeding, so to speak. Whoever survives these challenging conditions becomes, spreads their genetics, and that's how we keep things going. And so this is one that is, incredibly useful in many ways. You can also feed them to corals. There are invertebrates that will eat Tigger pods. Shrimp species will eat them. There's a video of the bottle. Here's a couple of images. One of the female with the egg mass on her urozone, and then there's a male with the claspers. This is an appendage that they use to hold onto the females during courting, during reproduction and mating. And so, yeah, and so what you get in a bottle is females carrying eggs, you get males mating with females, you get juveniles. And so there's a wide variety of age ranges. And one other interesting fact about copepods is they go through 12 different stages of development, at least the ones we work with. They start off with 6 nauplier stages. So these don't look anything like the parent. Then they go through a metamorphosis and they start looking more like their end result, the adult. They'll go through 6 molts and then become a terminal molt adult. Then they're reproductively active and they live the rest of their life for anywhere from 2 to 3 months. Okay, so we'll get into the other copepod. Now, we also started working with this animal because not only is it used in aquaculture, but this is one that is more likely to populate a reef tank. These guys are about 75% smaller than Tigger pods. They reproduce faster. They're just as hardy. They do not tolerate cold water, so we do not refrigerate them. You know, you would not find them in a refrigerator in a local fish store. You would find them at room temperature. I put a little bit of live algae in the bottle with them so they don't starve to death. So this is a product that will basically get into a retail store and be sold quite rapidly, or it's sold online, because once I put these animals in and the live algae in, the clock, starts ticking, and they're good for maybe 2 weeks before they run out of their food source. And there are ways to keep them going. You could add a couple of drops of phytoplankton to the bottle and that'll keep them. And so this is one of those animals that would be very beneficial as a long-term, copepod, zooplankton organism to improve biodiversity in any reef tank. Once you get these guys in the system, they're there forever. We typically recommend getting them in during the cycling phase of a new tank. This species, Apocyclops panamensis, is very well known for eating a wide variety of food items. They are known to eat dinoflagellates, cyano, diatoms. Diatoms are a huge part of the natural diet of copepods in the wild. And so, we us hobbyists have plenty of diatoms usually in our tanks. And so these guys will definitely consume those. And once their populations reach a certain density, they could potentially have a positive impact on your aquarium by, taking up nuisance algae and also eating ciliated protozoans and things like that. So, and then if you've got a predator like a mandarin or a cirrus or pipefish, those animals will benefit from eating this copepod. And so this is one that I don't feed any live algae to. I've been culturing these for about 6 or 7 years, and I don't feed them any live phytoplankton, which is another plus. They're euryhaline, so they can tolerate a wide range of salinities. And this is one that hobbyists can culture as well. And people are using these in aquaculture. There are people that have bred dwarf angelfish and have successfully fed the larval version of this copepod, the nauplii, to larval fish, and they were readily consumed and were very good for those fish. Copepods are basically one of the best food sources you can provide to a fish, whether it's a larval fish or an adult fish, as well as corals. This is a natural food source for these animals. They are chock full of things like omega-3 fatty acids. They get the carotenoids from the phytoplankton, which act as antioxidants, precursors for vitamin synthesis. They are basically a fish recognizes these guys as a food source because of the way copepods move, and things like that. So this is a great one if you wanted to, boost some zooplankton biodiversity, get these guys into a refugium, culture them, feed them to your fish. This is a good one. And unfortunately, they're not in a lot of stores, so you would have to buy these either direct from us or places like saltwateraquarium.com. Which they have way more affordable shipping than us. And so that's an option for you guys. And I just wanted to add also that the copepods that we work with are non-parasitic. They come with no fish pathogens because we don't have fish in our facility. We don't work with fish. We just work with invertebrates. We work with rotifers, copepods, and phytoplankton. That's it. And the majority of copepods in the world globally are actually parasitic, believe it or not, which is interesting. And one of a famous example is there's the Greenland shark actually has a copepod that attaches to its eyes, and the shark goes blind because of this. But these sharks can still feed; they can still sense prey in other ways. They don't need to actually visibly see these things. And so that's just one example of a parasitic copepod. Some copepods live on the outside of fish. So many live on the insides of fish. And they can be parasitic without actually killing these animals. Some of them, end up causing enough stress to kill these fish. But yeah, and many of them are cannibalistic. They will absolutely eat their own young if they're starving, if they're not getting the right environment. So it's be pretty interesting. So here's some photos I took under the microscope. There's a female. So this female is different than Tigger pods. They carry the egg clusters. They carry 2 egg clusters instead of 1. They are attached to what is called the urogenital segment. And what's interesting about copepods is they typically only require 1 mating occurrence. So the female stores the sperm and then fertilizes her own eggs without having to mate again, which is a great adaptation. And then you can see there's a picture of a nauplius, and that's the larval form of the copepod. And you can see how vastly different they look before that, that stage starts maturing and going through metamorphosis. All right, so let's see here. I'll check the chat real quick and see what kind of questions we have so far. Let's see if I can address them. Sorry. Okay, is there any research or proof regarding phytoplankton or copepods helping? So, it's interesting because there is some research being done. I've heard that Bulk Reef Supply did some things recently and produced a video. They are known to eat dinoflagellates, to eat diatoms. Now, whether they're going to eliminate those things and really cause a significant impact on those critters in your aquarium is really impossible to say, honestly, because every tank biologically is different. We all have, in many ways, different organisms, whether it's the microbiome, the zooplankton, our corals, our fish. There are all kinds of different things going on biologically from tank to tank. And so what I imagine is that there's just no way to say, I've got a 100-gallon mixed reef tank and I've got dinoflagellates. Can I add copepods and will it eat them up? There's no way to possibly say that will help. All the evidence so far from what I've seen is anecdotal. So people just saying, look, I did this, I added copepods, and 2 weeks later, the dinoflagellates were gone. Now, whether it was the copepods doing that or not is really impossible to say. It's just hard to prove it, especially if the hobbyist is doing things like changing multiple things all at the same time. Then there's no way to really nail down one specific thing and say, aha, eureka, that was it. That's what worked. So I tend to, all these things, take them with a grain of salt, don't take them as matter of fact. In the end, copepods are good for the aquarium. They provide a food source for corals and fish. They do eat detritus, organic materials and algae. But it's really hard to say what their real impact is. What makes Tigger pods so attractive for food for fish? With the Tigger pods, it's absolutely the movement of them. This kind of jittery movement is very visually appealing to fish. They recognize that immediately. They're like, that's a food source. Also the coloration, we grow these guys in greenhouses. We feed them a lot of phytoplankton. And so they have this very rich red coloration, which is a carotenoid. And for predators, that's another visual cue. Like that's something I can eat. Okay, so is it movement or the fact that they stay? So it's a little bit of both. These copepods that we work with tend to crawl on surfaces. They tend to get into the reef rock. And if they break free into the water column, obviously they're going to get picked off pretty fast. And so they try to blend in. Tigger pods aren't that very good at blending in. They typically get eaten before they can populate, whereas our apex pods are more likely to populate because they can reproduce faster. They're a little bit harder to see. They're smaller. They're not bright red. Okay, so why are some of our unfreezable? Okay, so the reason why some of our products are unfreezable, like the isocrisis and the pavlova, is because their cell wall, which is more like a cell membrane, is more delicate. And so the freezing process typically disrupts that cell wall integrity, that membrane. and it results in just, the cells are just exploded, so to speak. And so that's one of the reasons why refrigeration is needed for those species and not the other ones. Nanochloropsis tetrasomus, they have a very durable cell wall. They're more robust, and so they can be frozen. Yeah, you could use glycerol, absolutely. That's something that we are actually experimenting with, but we're not working with it quite yet, but it is something we're looking into. The best way to capture copepods from the aquarium to start a separate culture, that can be tricky because the problem with doing that is you could potentially capture other things that will be a contaminant in your culture. So you can always try it, but some ways is to, if you've got macroalgae in a refugium, you could pull the macroalgae out, put it in a container with salt water and shake it off, shake all those animals off, and then pour them through a screen, something very small, like a 41 micron screen. You could even use a coffee filter and then get them into culture and start growing them. And that's one way to do it. And also some people will just put habitat structure in their refugium or in their sump. The copepods colonize them over the course of, a few weeks or a month, and then they'll move that structure into their display to kind of transfer those animals into the display. So does opening up the bottle of liquid feeds expedite expiration? No, it does not. So once we bottle the product and put the cap on it, the clock starts ticking on what we call a best by date. It's not necessarily an expiration, it doesn't expire on that date. So we do have the dates on the bottle. We call them our best by date because once it reaches that best by date, the product may still be very good, perfectly fine to use. We typically tell everybody, give it a good smell when you get it and keep smelling it throughout your use. And keep an eye on it. If the phytoplankton's turning brown, going from green to brown, that's a signal that it's going bad. And also if it starts to smell like rotten eggs, that's very distinct smell. We all know that's bad. That means the product has perished. So color change and smell, keep an eye on those things, and you're good to go. And so let's see here. I've eaten an apocyclops. It was a cookie. Yes. Yeah, Jason, that was awesome. Yes, right on. Okay, what do you recommend for hobbyists who want to use products like Nano but can't use all of it effectively? So Nano 3600, so what you do is with Nano 3600, since it can be frozen, what you do is you get it in, you thaw it out in the refrigerator. If it's not thawed, this is the best way to thaw anything, actually, even meats that we eat. You thaw in the refrigerator, 24 hours later, you take that algae out, invert the bottle so everything gets a little bit rehomogenized, resuspended, and then you pour it into ice cube trays and make ice cubes, and then put those in a freezer protected freezer bag, and then thaw them out in the refrigerator as you need them. And so Nano 3600, you can have those ice cubes in your freezer for easily over a year, up to 2 years, and just thaw them out as you need them. And so that's a great way to use products like that. Which commonly available copepod species is the easiest and hardiest to culture for the? So our apex pods are very easy and very hardy to culture. Like I said, you can grow them with live algae or dead algae. They'll eat live algae that's, if you put a light on your culture, which I recommend because it kind of improves the live algae aspect of a culture. That way they always have food source available. If you're also dosing like our Phytofeast, our dead phytoplankton, or some of our other products. And so Apocyclops panamensis is a good one. And it's very similar to Tisbe. I've already talked about a lot of the positive attributes of that. Are they able to survive hydrogen peroxide dosing? That's a good question. I do not know. I do not know that. How exactly we wouldn't know if they have a population to support a mandarin? Is this? Yeah, that's a tough question. When do I know that I've got enough pods in the tank to sustain a mandarin? And that's a really tough question. I typically tell people, if you're starting a new tank and you got all dead rock and you want to get some living things growing on the rock, copepods, it's good to start them off during the cycle, get the apex pods in there, and just let it go for 6 months to a year before adding that predator. Let your tank mature enough before you get a fish like that. So you got to be very patient. You got to take your time. And that way you're not spending a ton of money. Like you don't get the mandarin 3 months later and you find that you don't have enough pods to support the mandarin. And then you end up having to culture them or buy them routinely to keep that mandarin alive while the population in the aquarium gets to a level that can sustain that fish. And also, the bigger the tank, the better. So more substrate, more structure. Refugiums are great. So the larger the tank, the better, as far as a copepod population that can support a mandarin. And also, there's people that have never added a pod to a tank and have mandarins. These are people that are getting live rock or cured rock or rock from a pet store and putting it in their tank. And sometimes these structures come with copepods. How would you suggest at-home culturing of the apex pods? So we do have some instructions on culturing the Tigger pods, and those culture suggestions are very similar to doing the apex pods. Any update on TDO in Canada? We're working on it, still working on it. We do sell live parvocalinus, just not through our Reef nutrition page. We do sell it through our Reed mariculture page. You just have to call in, and then we clear it with you to make sure you have what it takes to grow parvocalinus, because we have found that parvocalinus are a little bit tricky, and they're best grown on live T. isocrisis. And that's a very good species to grow them on. We've been growing ours on T. iso for 10, 11 years. Do the Tigger pods and apex pods also eat phyto? Yes, that's all we feed them. All we feed them at our facility is phytoplankton. They will eat other things. They'll eat, rotting flake food. They'll eat, I know some people that feed them rat chow. They're very hardy animals. They're bugs, they're insects after all, basically. But phytoplankton we have found is a very good food source for them, and we can get them growing quite well on phytoplankton. Okay, so there's the answer to the parvocalinus. Awesome. Okay, so it's like I got through most of these questions so far. So cool. Let's get into the next slides here. Am I back? Yeah. Okay, so PhytoFeast. I've talked a lot about our phytoplankton already. You guys are familiar with the PhytoFeast. It comes in a variety of sizes. There's all the genuses of the algae that we provide. We do provide full species names on our website. And then, some of the diatoms like the Lasiacyra, Weissflogii, that's a diatom. And then you've got your golden brown algae, Pavlov, Isochrysis, Tetrasomus is kind of a green algae, very large. Nanochloropsis is another green one, and then Synechococcus is an algae that we grow that's part of this product. And one thing I must mention about PhytoFeast, our PhytoFeast concentrate and our PhytoFeast Live is it is the most concentrated phytoplankton product on the market. You are looking to buy marine microalgae, phytoplankton to feed to your fish, to your invertebrates, to your corals, to your pods, to your rotifers. Our PhytoFeast is uncomparable. Nobody else has a product like this. We are more than 20 times as concentrated as our top competitor as far as a blend of phytoplankton goes. And so you are getting significantly more phytoplankton when using our product versus our competition. And one thing that sets us apart is that, we're a large scale phytoplankton facility. We're 1.5 million gallons. And so we can sustain week after week, month after month, year after year, a product that is highly concentrated, more biomass than you will see from anybody else. And so I highly suggest, if you aren't believing what I'm saying, go ahead and buy a bottle of our PhytoFeast and compare it to what you're currently using. And, people are more than welcome to grow their own phytoplankton. That's perfectly acceptable. A lot of people do that and feed it to their tanks, but people that don't want to, this is a great option, and it is actually the best option you will find in this country and across the world where people buy PhytoFeast and sell it from retail stores. This is a great one for a variety of animals: filter feeding bivalves, sponges, tunicates. Your copepods in your aquarium will eat these. We have people feeding them to crinoids, basket stars, feather duster worms. It's an all-around great product for those things. This one has a best buy date of 9 months. We have directions on the bottle for target feeding and for broadcast feeding. So on all of our labels, we have information, that's guaranteed analysis, ingredients. We're very transparent about all these things. And then we've also got our directions for use. We recommend, and I'm going to say this once and then it'll apply for everything, that you start off with our lowest recommended dosage with any of our concentrates, because we do not know how many mouths you have to feed. We do not know how your aquarium will process this food. And we don't know how well you are good at tank maintenance and your waste export. So start off with 1 teaspoon per 100 gallons per day. And that's your benchmark. And then from there, you can add more, and you can feed it every day. Some people feed it once a week. That's totally fine. And then from there, as long as you're measuring the food, you can increase the dosage amount over time. So see that there's a couple more questions here. Is pavlova as horticulture as everybody says it is? Yes. So pavlova, rhodomonas, isochrysis, those are some of the more trickier species of algae to culture. And so, yeah, I would say that those, as far as compared to like Nanochloropsis, they are much harder, much more challenging. But once people dial it in, it's, obviously it's going to be a piece of cake. Let's see here. Can you overdose Phyto? Absolutely. Yes. I mean, if we've had customers where their child grabbed the bottle and dumped the whole thing in the sump. If this happens, it's good to have, filter socks on hand. If you're already using them, those things will strip them out. A protein skimmer will help strip it out. And a nice water change will help strip it out. I mean, it won't nuke the tank instantaneously because the phytoplankton cells are fully intact. They're not going to explode and just leak out everything, within the cell. And so it's, that's a worst case scenario where your kid dumps the whole bottle in. If you accidentally are feeding it and the cap pops off and a glob falls in, it's not the end of the world, not going to kill everything. Just do some water quality testing over the next week and maybe, adjust your water change schedule and just, clean your filters more often. That's what I would recommend. No, filter socks are perfectly fine for just dosing normal doses of phytoplankton to your tank, because the cells are very small. So I don't know what kind of filter sock size people typically use, 100 micron. The largest cell in phytofeces is about 15 micron. So if you've got a filter sock that's larger than 15 micron, then the algae cells are going to simply just go right through that. So if you can culture Rhodomonas, you should be able to take on pavlova. Absolutely. If you're culturing algae and you understand contamination and biosecurity and how clean things need to be, that all of that, and you're doing Rhodomonas, absolutely you can take on some pavlova. And pavlova is a great source of DHA, by the way, very rich in DHA, like isochrysis. Do the copepods in my tank really eat the small about phytoplankton I dose, or are they mainly eating? So they're eating both. They will take up phytoplankton that's in the water column as it's drifting past them. They will grab it and consume it. They have, little feeding appendages that they use. And so, if you've got corals, they're going to eat the phytoplankton. Filter feeding invertebrates and the zooplankton are absolutely going to eat the phytoplankton, even if it's drifting around. All right. So let's get back. So so here's a visual comparison of our algae after, what I talked about. And there's a price comparison. You're paying 45 cents a gram for our algae and $9.22 a gram for our competitors. It doesn't even come close. And, tell all your friends. Okay. So let's get into some of the other products that we do not grow at the farm. We buy oyster ovarian sacs from the oyster, what do you call it? Oyster aquaculture farms on the East Coast. We get them in frozen, so they're contamination free. And then we process them and turn them into oyster feed. So this is our top coral food. This is oyster eggs, ovarian tissue, amino acids, lipids, fats, things like that. This is very rich in those components. This one is great for SPS corals all the way up to anemones and filter feeding worms, things like that will consume this. This is our most popular product. This is what hobbyists, public aquariums, coral growers, people that are spawning corals in captivity, this is what everybody's using as part of their dietary regime for their animals. And so this one really elicits a very strong feeding response. Those natural amino acids and fats are very stimulating to corals. You get great coral polyp extension, feeding tentacles coming out, great coloration improvement and overall bushiness, you could say, of SPS corals and many, many other invertebrates. And so here you have the same information I discussed earlier. 9 months this product is good for. As long as you keep our products refrigerated in between use, you're good to go. And there's the directions for use on the label. So there's a hot autoclave. It is right on. Okay, so moving along. Oh, got another question maybe here. Do you keep the power heads running when feeding oyster feast, or do you more or less target feed them? So most people broadcast feed while the power heads are running. Even some people will leave the recirc pumps running. And that's perfectly fine. Corals and invertebrates are used to stripping food particles out of the water column. So that's broadcast feeding is the most common method because people just don't want to take the time to target feed. But if you do take the time to target feed, you definitely want to turn off all the pumps. And there are target feeding instructions on the label. Make sure to follow those because you don't want to cold shock any of your coral colonies because this product is kept in your refrigerator, so it's in the mid to upper 30s. Or low 40s. And so we recommend 4 parts tank water, 1 part product, and then use your favorite target feeding device and get it done. So these are just oyster eggs. And let's see, what is the difference between oyster feasts and chucking oysters into a blender? So oyster feast is specifically the oyster eggs. It's the ovarian sacs, specifically that. So it's not like the meat, the muscle, the other things that are part of the oyster body. When I target feed my LPS, I use oyster feast and phytofeast as a liquid component when mixing the powdered coral food. Yeah, so that's, a lot of people do that. Some people even mix our TDOA, our powdered form of TDO, which I'm going to talk about later, with our oyster feast and phytofeast. And that is a huge amount of nutrition. The variety is immense, and your corals will love you for that kind of combination. So that's a great comment there, Jason. A lot of people will combine our phytofeast and oyster feast when feeding a mixed reef or a non-NPS dominant reef. These food components, the nutritional value, the nutritional diversity is immense when using these products together. So. Okay, phytofeast live. So I'm going to touch base on this one real quick. So there are people in the hobby that believe that live algae is better for their invertebrates, for animals that are consuming phytoplankton. But there's also a whole section of this hobby that believes that live phytoplankton will bioremediate an aquarium, as in it will take up significant amounts of phosphates and nitrogenous waste like ammonia, nitrate, nitrite, in significant quantities to clean up the water column, to clean up your aquarium. And also there are people that believe that this live algae will outcompete nuisance algae, whether it's the live algae colonizes surfaces or is taking up all those nutrients and depriving that nuisance algae of those nutrients. And so while there are plenty of people that says it works, there's nobody that has gone out there and really proven that it works. And this is another one of those things where it's impossible to say it's a one size fits all, just feed live phytoplankton to any tank, anybody's tank. Whether it's NPS dominant, fish only, blah, blah, blah. It's just impossible to say that it's going to work. For me, phytoplankton is a food source, period. Now, if those things work for you and you are confident that they've worked for you at getting rid of dinoflagellates, nuisance species, that's amazing. And I'm glad that worked. But there are people that have done this and said it doesn't work. I fed live phytoplankton in my tank for months and I still have nuisance algae. You got to basically get to the core of the problem and go from there. Now, there's some people that we use food, specifically phytoplankton, like our phytofeast, to improve the nutrient levels in their aquarium because, this is life. These were living things. So they have things like amino acids, which have nitrogen on them. They have phosphate. It's just a natural part of living organisms, of organic life. And so these things will help boost phosphates a little bit. They will help boost nitrate a little bit. And so if you have 0 nutrient tanks, this will help kind of boost some of those things. So we came out with PhytoFeast Live to kind of satiate those people, to satisfy those people. This product is only alive. The phytoplankton is alive for only about 3 months. And even when it's not viable, which we call it live, we call it viable, where it can go through cellular fission, reproduce itself. Even after it's no longer alive, you can still continue to feed it. basically corals, filter feeders, they do not care if the algae is alive or not. They will consume it. Just like we feed dead stuff to our fish all day, people feed powdered foods to their corals. The same thing applies for the pods in your tank and the corals. They do not care if it's alive. And so that's just something to keep in mind. These are opportunistic organisms. So why is Synechococcus in the blend? Well, to be honest, Synechococcus just showed up in our cultures and it hasn't gone away, and we haven't bothered eradicating it because it's not a serious nuisance to us. So we just made it part of, we were transparent and said it's in there, and it's just part of the background of PhytoFeast. And so that's why it's in there. Okay, so let's get into some of the other products. So roe, which is our fish eggs, we get these guys from the cod industry up in Alaska. We buy the roe sacks and strip out all the eggs, clean them up, and make this product. This one's wildly popular among hobbyists feeding it to fish and corals. They really like this one. And so if you're looking for a crossover food where you want corals to eat something and fish to eat something, this is one of those products. So typically people are using the Oyster Feast, the PhytoFeast, and the roe. Those are pretty much the top 3 products that people are using from our line to feed to corals and fish. Fish eggs are chock full of amino acids, fats, things like that. There really isn't a fish out there that won't eat a fish egg. You know, if you're watching National Geographic and it's a documentary about spawning fish, or there's videos of spawning fish, when fish are spawning, what do you see? You see other fish going right after them and eat them up, especially if it's a broadcast spawner. If it's a demersal spawner like a clownfish, you're not going to see that because the clownfish are going to chase them off and try to kill them. But broadcast spawners, you're going to see fish just wolfing down those eggs as soon as they're released into the water column. Very common sight. Okay, same thing, 9-month best buy date, highly concentrated, great source of nutrition, another variety of nutrition for your animals. And then there's the label in the bottle, on the bottle, everything's there. And you can also see all of this on our website. We have the label, we have images of the label on every single product. Okay, RotiFeast, this is a pretty unique product. These are, so we culture live rotifers at our facility, which we sell into aquaculture. People feed these animals, which are pictured there, alive to, like, let's say clownfish larvae or dottyback larvae, or even in food fish industry, they're feeding them to like cod, things like that. So those are some things that we grow, and we decided to make a product from them. So in a 6-ounce bottle, you will find roughly 5 million of these animals in that bottle, and they're very good because rotifers, basically we feed them the phytoplankton. They digest the phytoplankton. They store the components of the phytoplankton in their tissue, not necessarily in their gut. I mean, the gut-loaded thing, yes, sometimes they have them in their gut. A lot of times it's just stored in the tissue itself. And so rotifers are a great way to deliver phytoplankton and all the nutrient from phytoplankton to the animal that's eating the rotifer. Great way to deliver phytoplankton to a consumer. And so these guys are not alive, just like, the only live products we sell are the PhytoFeast Live and the 2 Copepods. So the rest of these products I'm talking about, nothing's alive. And so this is a great animal. People love feeding this SPS. We get really good feedback on this product because people are like, dude, we feed the RotiFeast and our corals just wake up. They go crazy for this stuff and they consume it and eat it, and they just do quite well. So this is one that a lot of people have to know about. They have to just give it a try one time, and a lot of people will incorporate this one into their feeding regime. So the sodium is the purpose of the alginate to clump the eggs together? No, the alginate is basically just to keep things suspended so it doesn't all settle down. That's all. It's just a food grade alginate to keep things suspended. You're looking to rinse the eggs to get rid of it so smaller fish can access it with them. Yeah, so so our roe doesn't really blob up. It doesn't really clump up. And if you're concerned about it clumping, if you do see some clumps, you can just take the dose, put it in a cup, kind of mix it up, stir it up, and break up some of those clumps. But typically it doesn't clump. Our process is we try to avoid that kind of thing. And that's another thing that people like about our products. Okay, RotiFeast, 9-month best buy date. There's all your label information and all the fun stuff, and great for NPS corals, sea fans, anemones, and even smallmouth finicky fish. Okay, pack pods. This is a concentrated copepod, not alive. These are brand new. This is a cyclopoid copepod, so it's in the same order as the Apocyclops penamensis, the live pod that we sell. And this one we're finding is people are just loving this for wild caught mandarins and seahorses and pipefish. They're telling us that within 24 hours of arrival, these animals are eating this dead copepod with gusto. And so this is a great one for super finicky fish. You want to get a mandarin off of, to eat dead things. This is a product for you. This is also a great food source for corals. It's a very small particle size, about 0.5 millimeter, and to 0.8 millimeters in length. And so you can feed this to corals as well and deliver, a nutrition packed animal to your corals and your fish. And so anthias, chromis, finicky butterflies, and angelfish, they will consume this. This is a good one. So if you're pulling your hair out on nutrition for your animals and you're having trouble getting a fish to eat, this is one for you. We have store owners and distributors that are loving this product. They're feeding it to wild caught, finicky fish and finding it very useful to feed. And so this one is only a 4-month best by date because this is a little bit more of an animal that's got more carotenoids, more lipids, things that could potentially go bad sooner. And so this has a shorter shelf life. So just keep that in mind. And then, there's the label with all the information. And then we also have Tigger feast. So this is another copepod. This is incredibly unique in the industry. This one is purely aquacultured by us. So whereas the pack pods we get from the Alaska fishery, we buy them frozen, we thaw them out. This one we grow ourselves. And so Tigger feast is the equivalent of 53 bottles of Tigger pod biomass in one bottle. Tigger pods are fully intact. They're just not alive. And so this one has a 1-year best by date, and it is another great way to get finicky fish to eat other things besides live feed organisms. And so this one is used to be seasonal, but now our production is through the roof. We've gotten very good at producing Tigriopus, and so we produced all year round now. My LFS is going to love seeing my RN shopping list this week. Yes, Jason, thank you so much for supporting your local fish store. Appreciate that. Okay, so Tigger feast, yep, keep it refrigerated, good for a year. And it's a lot of Tigger pods in one bottle. And so the cost savings is phenomenal. I mean, imagine, this bottle is, I think, $30, a little over $30. Tigger pods are almost $26. And so, 54 bottles of Tigger pods, 54 times 26 in one bottle, the cost savings is phenomenal. They're just not alive, but the cost savings is just ridiculous. So yeah, this is a good one. You're looking for more concentrated copepod. And now we get into some of our products that are the alternative to the frozen stuff. So you've got Arctipods, which is a copepod, a larger copepod that we get from the Scandinavian area, buy them frozen and then sell them this way. Another great copepod for feeding to fish. A lot of people will feed Arctipods purely to their fish and some of their LPS corals. And then we got the brine shrimp and mysis feast. So these are just great alternatives to frozen stuff. If you don't want to deal with thawing out brine shrimp or mysis, these are the products for you. You just simply keep it in the fridge, squirt and go. Real easy to use. No thawing, no touching, no breaking chunks off. The mysis feast is actually PE mysis. We buy it from Piscean Energetics and just made it easier for people to use. So people thawing things out, we do it for you. Okay, can all of these products be frozen into ice cube trays like previously suggested, or one of them? I live an hour away from an OFS. Products. If I order them directly from you, I would want to bulk order, divide, and freeze. So, we don't recommend that you freeze our products, but there are people that do it, and we haven't heard any complaints. As long as you're freezing them appropriately, and when you thaw them out, you're feeding them pretty quickly, because when you combine our products have different chemistry. Because there's a huge difference between a mysis shrimp and an algae cell. And so the chemistry is certainly different. And so when you thaw these things out, the expiration might happen quickly. And so you got to keep that in mind. The liquid in the bottles is reverse osmosis, deionized water, and then we add the salts and the sodium alginate and citric acid, some things to preserve, to keep any bacteria even at low temperature. So there are things on the label that talk about these. All right, so for some of the very small captive bred fish, tiny mandarins, are the pack pods the best pod or use pack pods and Tigger pods. You know, you could use both if you wanted to, or you could use just one of them. And yes, very good for some of the tiny captive bred fish. In fact, some hatcheries are now using pack pods as part of the weaning phase. So, you know, let's say you're a clownfish breeder or you're breeding other marine ornamental fish for the aquarium trade. You got them through metamorphosis and you want to get them off of live feeds. We call it weaning. Start weaning them onto dead things, and seahorses as well fall in this category. And pack pods, Tigger pods would be very useful for that. We have people using Tigger pods as part of seahorse diet, feeding them to dwarf seahorses, things like that. So it'd be a great food source to get your fish onto, even if they're coming out of a captive bred scenario. You bought them, putting them in your tank. Yes, you can use them in that way, either one or both. Are mice able to be live cultured in the home? Yes, they are. USMycids.com. I think they're mycids.com. He's the guys in Florida, I think. He sells live mycids and you can grow them. Keep in mind, they're a little bit more challenging because they're very, very cannibalistic. So you got to constantly separate babies from adults. And so, and somebody was saying nothing will spike the tank. So any food item will spike nutrients in a tank. Yeah, thank you for including the link to mycids.com. There you go. And you know, any food will pollute a tank. So that's why we always recommend you start off conservative. Be conservative with everything. Don't overfeed your fish. Don't feed your fish every time you walk by the tank, even though they follow you and look like they're hungry. You know, don't overthink it. Fish don't need to really eat all day. And if you are going to feed them multiple times, feed them tiny amounts throughout the day. So that's, you know, that's what I recommend. And this is with anything on my products, anybody else. So here's an example of somebody auto dosing our products, our foods, into an aquarium. Somebody got real creative and basically built a cabinet, their cabinet, which is part of their aquarium cabinet, to fit a small mini fridge, a mini fridge in the cabinet, and put their, you know, here you have the GHL dosers, put their dosers in the refrigerator, which these dosers and many others can handle cold temperatures. I use them to dose phytoplankton to my apex pods, to the Apis cyclops. They work perfectly fine year after year in a refrigerator. And so you can see here, they've got, you know, the guy's got the channels, he's got rigid tubing down in the bottle. You don't have to swirl the bottles, which is awesome because, you know, we use that alginate to keep everything suspended. So there's no need to agitate to use a magnetic stir or a shaker table. And you know, if you have enough channels and enough room for your dosers, you can feed multiple kinds of our products. And here you can see the schematic where the water is actually, the return line is actually running right through the refrigerator with a small venturi. You know, it's kind of like a venturi where the food goes into the feed line when the dosers turn on and feed it. And the, you know, as long as everything's secured at that injection point, you know, you're not gonna, you know, nothing's really gonna happen. You know, the water's flowing through the tube. So even if that feed tube pops off of that injection site, you're just going to suck air into the tank. You're not going to squirt water out because it acts as a venturi at that point. So this is kind of cool. This guy's on Reef to Reef. He's very active and is willing to talk to anybody about this kind of thing. So yeah, very creative. And, you know, there's a variety of other ways to do this. And, you know, some people will just feed our foods to a refugium, drip the food into the refugium, and then the food makes its way up into the main tank. And so there's all kinds of creative ways to you know, set up a refrigerator next to your system and do this. Okay, let's get into the dry food. So TDO, a lot of people love this food for a variety of reasons. We primarily sell it into aquaculture. So people that are breeding, let's say clownfish, are using this food. It has immense, it's got great digestibility, a wide variety of sizes, so it can be used as a weaning diet. And I talked about weaning. Starts off as a powder, and then there's a variety of sizes after that. So in an aquaculture setting, let's say you're breeding clownfish, roughly before metamorphosis, around day 3 or 4 of that clownfish's life, you're going to introduce this powdered form, the TDOA, and start introducing it very slowly over time. And as the fish grows, you can offer it the next size up. And then once you get your fish off of that live feed organism, whether it's a copepod or rotifer, you can start offering it just this pelleted powdered food. This food is not only being used by clownfish, it's also being used by companies like Biota They're feeding it to, their larval fish and their post-larval fish. We buy this food from Japan. It's called otohime. It's a very popular gold standard fish food in aquaculture, sold all over the world to people culturing cobia, snook, freshwater fish, bluegill, salmon, trout, largemouth bass. Otohime is being used in sea bream hatcheries, flounder hatcheries, sea bass hatcheries in the Mediterranean. It's being used in Turkey. It's all over the place. And so we buy this food from Japan. We're the North American distributor. And what we did was we worked with Virginia Tech to optimize a carotenoid called astaxanthin that we coat otohime with. And so we get this carotenoid from a freshwater algae called Haematococcus pluvialis. This algae species produces this red carotenoid under the right growing conditions. And this carotenoid is useful to enhance pigmentation. It also acts as an antioxidant, and it's a precursor for some vitamin synthesis. And so what we did was we worked with Virginia Tech to optimize this carotenoid on this food to result in wild type coloration in the common clownfish that you find in the hobby. So Amphiprion percula and Amphiprion ocellaris. Those two species are very commonly bred clownfish. They are the Nemo, if you will, of the aquarium trade. And so clownfish breeders love this food because it makes their fish look wild type. Without a carotenoid, a strong carotenoid like astaxanthin in the diet of clownfish, for instance, these clownfish come out looking brown, in some cases yellow, and they just don't look like their wild counterparts. So you have to have the carotenoid in the diet at the right concentration. And another interesting fact about carotenoids is the majority of animals on the planet cannot synthesize carotenoids. There are some animals, spider mites can synthesize their own carotenoids, and some fungi, but for the most part, they have to come from the diet. So for a classic example is a flamingo. Flamingos stop eating those shrimp in nature. There are these little shrimp that eat phytoplankton. The shrimp store the carotenoid. The flamingo eats the shrimp. They get the carotenoid. They get the coloration in their plumage. Without that, they lose that coloration. And so the same thing happens with certain fish species. And so this carotenoid is awesome, not only for pigmentation enhancement in clownfish, it also acts as an antioxidant. So it's great for overall health of fish, and you can feed it to corals. And the versatility is amazing. Like, people are feeding this to all kinds of, not just marine fish and invertebrates. They're feeding it to salamanders and frogs and axolotls. And it's just like, I know people that have fed it to their chickens, and the yolk was completely red coming out of the chicken, and they're just blown away by that. So yeah, you can even use it as a fertilizer. If you've got some TDO that's gone bad, grind it into your soil. After all, it does have fish meal in it, and we all know that fish meal can be very good for soil. So yeah, here are some. Yeah, let me. I'll address the chat really quick here. Okay, so let's just comments. Okay, so here are some videos of how it's being used, other than just as a fish food for finicky fish and things like that. So here are some orange spot filefish, which many of you know are coral eaters. Like, it's really hard to get these guys into an aquarium and get them to eat anything but coral. And so with a little bit of patience, some time, perseverance, you can get them to eat TDO. And so here's a pair that one of my good friends in the hobby had, and they were just eating TDO, quite actively. I mean, you can see it right here, and even picking it up off the ground, off the bottom of the tank. And so this was just really cool to see. And then we've got videos of corals. So Chad Vossen, Boston Aquatics, sent me a video of his Scalemia coral eating TDO, time lapse, and he just squirts the TDO onto them, and the coral, it's like, dude, this is food. It starts waking up. It's very stimulating, and moving that food right to its mouth. And then we got more hobbyists sending us videos of corals eating TDO. So, basically, if you wanted to, you could feed just our products to your corals and your fish, and even include a dry feed, that's a competitor to all the other dry foods out there. So you could use our TDOA which is a powder. It's, you know, it's in the similar size range to all the other powders out there, 75 to 250 microns, so roughly the size of a rotifer, which is barely visible to the naked eye. You can read people feeding this to SPS corals. The TDOA stays in suspension. It doesn't degrade rapidly. It's digestible. It's good for these organisms. And so, you know, if you wanted, you could just use our products and you'd be good to go. So here's some garden eels. Garden eels. There's TDO kind of just rolling along on the sand, and the garden eel is just eating it. And it's just remarkable. And so, yeah, I just wanted to go back to this slide real quick. Yeah, you can see this is a hobbyist that had this clownfish here. I think it's an amphiprion, or amphiprion percula. And a month later, look at that wild type coloration. It's the same fish after eating TDO for just a month. And I mean, you guys can do this yourself. Get some TDO and do it yourself. All right, so what's this comment? I will now target feed my tubastria. Yeah, absolutely. Do it. Do it. Okay. So hopefully everybody's okay with the time frame here. I can motor through the rest of this here. I'm so sorry for going over an hour. So here's, you guys can feed it to freshwater fish too, TDO. You can feed a lot of our products to freshwater fish. And so here's before and after flower horn. Here's the after. You can see there. I feed it to my freshwater fish. Here we have a feed chart, helps break it down. We've got some of this information on our website. And then we've got our product use charts, which helps guide you through all the products and how they're being used. And then we've got breeder supplies for people that are, you know, wanting to start breeding clownfish or anything like that. So we've got a number of things to make that happen. Weird question, but is there any way I can just buy the RN bottles with the stuff in them? I can show why I'd like them after Chad's finished talking. Buy the stuff without them in them. Huh, you mean like buy the raw ingredients from us? Is that what you're saying? Okay, so, and then, you know, we got some testimonials, things like that on our website you can check out. We're on social media, Facebook, Instagram. Okay, so that basically sums it up. Oh, you mean
that was amazing.
Yeah, wow. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll stop sharing and okay.
No, man, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. It was really fun, and you definitely demystify a lot of misconceptions I personally had, and a lot of things that I didn't know how to look at it. Now at least I understand the differences between the products. So it's a great presentation. I really appreciate it. Team, we appreciate Chad here. Feel free to post your questions on the thread. I will send it to Chad and see if he will have time to answer it. Maybe we can post it on the thread. But for now, we want to be respectful of his time. And we want to thank him greatly for today. And hopefully will come be a guest on this platform one more time in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate everybody's time. Thank you so much for taking time out of your weekend. I know what that means. You know, it's a big deal sometimes if you have a family. So I really appreciate it. And by the way, feel free to reach out to me. You can email me. I'm on Facebook Messenger, Instagram, direct message. And I'm also at trade shows. So I'm going to be in Raleigh, North Carolina at the end of the month at Reef Smart. So come to that show if you're in that area. I'll be in Anaheim for Reefapalooza in August. I'll be at MACNA in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in September, and I'll be in Dallas for Reefapalooza in October. So, and then, and also in September, I'll be at the Silicon Valley Coral Farmers Market in San Jose. So if you want to see me in person and talk it up and geek out, let's do it. You know, come on by, come to the booth. These shows are really fun. So appreciate everybody.
I testify to how responsive you are, by the way. I really testify with that. You are responsive on any of the ways you mentioned, and that's what have made you unique and what have made Reef Nutrition unique, because people can reach out and people get their answers from you. So kudos to you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your weekend. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all. Thank you, Chad. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.